Russia's reported drone attacks on two industrial sites in Tatarstan, located more than 1,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. They reportedly targeted facilities assembling drones and an oil refinery. If the attacks were launched from Ukrainian territory, it would be one of the most far-reaching drone operations carried out by Ukraine's forces since the beginning of the war. Now, in a moment, we're going to speak to Yulia Shapovalova in Moscow. First, go to Charles Stratford in Kyiv. So this was a long way into Russian territory. What does this tell us about Ukrainian capabilities if it does turn out that Ukrainian was responsible?
Well, firstly, Rob, certainly it does seem that the Ukrainians were responsible for this. At least they're claiming that. Multiple news agencies have been speaking to their contacts with the Ukrainian authorities. We actually made a call to Ukrainian intelligence. They're saying that they did carry out this attack, which, as you say, 1,300 kilometers away from Ukraine. It shows you how seemingly Ukrainian homemade weapons now have a capability to hit targets right the way across Russia. We know that the Ukrainians have been developing, for example, their own drones. One particular drone is believed to be able to fly at very high altitude, can operate for up to 30 hours. Now, we can't confirm whether this particular drone was used in this instance, but I think what it highlights is some of the challenges that Ukraine is facing during, of course, this huge, great escalation in attacks on energy infrastructure by Russia inside Ukraine. Now, Ukraine's largest ally, the Americans, are not happy with these kind of attacks. They are concerned about, for example, the increase on oil price, obviously, as we approach an election in America, and they're concerned about an additional escalation that this may cause as well. But Ukrainian President Zelenskyy has said that Ukraine has every right to launch these strikes deeply inside Russia, because the Russians are doing exactly that here in Ukraine. And he says that this is their own weaponry. They're not using Western-donated technology to do these things. So this, we understand, is just one of at least two strikes in that area overnight. We're waiting for confirmation, but there are reports also that there was another attack, potentially using a Ukrainian drone, on an oil facility also in that region of Tatarstan, around 1,300 kilometers from Ukraine.
Charles, there's always been a lot of speculation about a Russian spring offensive. How does all of this fit into the broader picture of the war?
There is a lot of speculation about a potential offensive by Russia in the coming months, of course, in the wake of what is widely described as a failure in the Ukrainian counter-offensive last year. But this is a huge undertaking. Although we've seen an uptick in Russian attacks in recent weeks, certainly building on Russian forces taking control of the town of Avdiivka in February, we've seen incremental gains in that area, Russian forces taking villages in that area, also to the north of Avdiivka. A combined offensive by Russian forces will be very difficult indeed, and that's despite their firepower superiority. Some analysts are saying that superiority is so dramatic at the moment, they're describing it as a serious crisis for the Ukrainians. It's believed that the rate of fire on any given day along the front line, for every 2,000 shells that the Ukrainians are firing, Russia's firing 10,000 in return, or using 10,000 in any given day. So that's an example of the kind of weapon advantage that the Russians have. But of course, it also involves huge amounts of manpower. We know that Russia has launched its spring conscription, its twice-yearly conscription. Putin says that he wants 150 men to be conscripted, but the Russians have also said that those conscripts would not be used inside Ukraine because that would be against Russian law. But that begs the question, where in Putin's eyes does Ukraine begin? Because, of course, Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson, for example, he sees as now being legitimately inside Ukrainian territory following those referenda that were held almost 2 years ago. So it's not inconceivable that we may see a push by Russian forces in the coming months, but it is an incredible challenge for the Kremlin to mount such a coordinated attack.
Charles, thanks very much indeed. That's Charles Stratford talking to us from Kyiv. Well, Yulia Shapovalova is joining us now from Moscow. What has the response from the Kremlin been to this attack?
Well, basically, the official reaction we're getting is from the local officials. So the Kremlin still is being silent. So the number of injured of that drone attack in Yelabuga in Russia's Tatarstan has increased to 7 people. That's according to the local emergency services. So for the first time, a Ukrainian drone flew to a target as far as 1,300 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border. It happened early Tuesday morning. The Ukrainian drones struck the cities of Nizhny and Yelabuga in Tatarstan. So in Yelabuga, the drone hit a facility where Russia allegedly was assembling long-range Shahed attack drones. Russia allegedly uses them to target Ukraine. And head of the Republic, Rustam Minikhanov, reported there were no serious damage. The technological process as there had not been disrupted. And also a pro-Russian military blog suggested that most likely a light aircraft converted into a UAV was used for that strike. So basically, the Yelabuga Special Economic Zone in the city of Yelabuga is a place where Iranian Shahed drones are assembled, as I mentioned, and also a dormitory for students and employees of those production facilities in Yelabuga were attacked by UAVs, injuring several people. So basically, also the oil facility in the city of Nizhny also took place, and actually it's not the first one. It caused fire, which was later extinguished, and since the beginning of the year, attacks on oil and gas infrastructure facilities in Russia have intensified.
Yulia, thank you very much indeed.